My father slept with my fiancée the night before our wedding. I exposed them both in front of 150 guests and walked away without looking back. My name is Daniel Morgan. I was 33, successful, engaged to the love of my life, and ready to start the next chapter surrounded by friends and family. My father, Stephen, was more than just a parent. He was my mentor, my idol, the kind of man other sons envied. Emily Carter, my fiancée, was everything I thought I ever wanted: charming, intelligent, beautiful. She had slipped seamlessly into our family, even earning my mother's heartfelt approval. We were less than 12 hours from saying our vows at St. Andrew's Chapel when everything unraveled. A single message changed everything. A careless, lust-drenched text from Emily to Stephen shattered the illusion. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-scale implosion of everything I believed in. But instead of rage, I chose something colder: precision, revenge, and a moment no one in that church would ever forget. Because when the priest asked if anyone objected, I stepped forward with the truth and a QR code that set the world on fire. Growing up, I thought my family was the definition of stability. My father, Stephen Morgan, was the man everyone respected: charismatic, honorable, the kind who shook hands firmly and remembered birthdays. My mother, Linda, was the heart of our home: warm, perceptive, quietly strong. Our house in northern Chicago was filled with the smell of baked apples, the echo of laughter from Sunday dinners, and the quiet assurance that everything would be all right. From a young age, I idolized my father. He coached my baseball team, taught me how to drive, and read every single college essay I ever wrote. He wasn't just a role model. He was my blueprint for the kind of man I wanted to become. Watching him and my mom made me believe in lifelong love, the kind that ages like wine and anchors you through any storm. By the time I was 30, I had built a solid life for myself as a senior consultant in tech strategy. I traveled often, worked long hours, but I never stopped looking for something more. That more walked into my life at a networking event in New York. Emily Carter. She was standing near the bar, arguing passionately with a colleague about UX design. I remember being struck not just by her beauty but by the fire in her voice. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just real. We clicked instantly. After our second date, I canceled 2 meetings just to spend an afternoon with her walking through Central Park. By the end of the month, we were inseparable. Emily was bright, intuitive, and could match my sarcasm beat for beat. She challenged me, believed in me, and made me laugh harder than anyone had in years. Within 6 months, she moved in with me in Chicago. She knew how to live. Introducing her to my parents felt like presenting a masterpiece. My mother welcomed her with open arms, thrilled to see me so happy, but it was my father's reaction that stuck with me. He pulled me aside after dinner and said, "You did well, son. She's one of a kind." At the time, I took that as approval, the kind that mattered most to me. Emily fit into our family effortlessly. She brought wine to Sunday dinners, laughed at my dad's dry jokes, and even joined my mom in her charity events. Looking back, I remember her asking a lot about my father's career, his routines, and his history in real estate. I thought she was just trying to bond. I didn't think too hard about it. Why? We started planning our wedding 8 months into our engagement. She wanted a fall ceremony with warm tones and vintage flair. I agreed to everything she wanted, from the 8-piece jazz ensemble to the custom menu. Emily had a vision, and I wanted to make it real for her. I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted her to be happy. By the time we booked St. Andrew's Chapel, my life felt like a carefully curated movie montage. Every scene led to joy. Every step toward the wedding felt like fate, confirming what I already believed: that I had found my person, and that she loved me as deeply as I loved her. One of the most vivid memories I have is of the night we announced our engagement. We had just come back from a weekend in Lake Geneva, where I had proposed during a quiet boat ride under a sky full of stars. Emily said yes, through tears, laughing and crying at the same time. That Monday, we hosted a small dinner at my parents' house to share the news. My mother cried the moment she saw the ring. My father stood up, raised his glass, and toasted to new beginnings and old values. Later that night, I remember catching a moment between Emily and my dad in the kitchen. They were laughing about something, her hand on his arm, his head tilted toward her like he was hanging onto every word. I smiled, thinking how lucky I was that the 2 people I loved most were getting along so well. It never once crossed my mind that something deeper, something darker, might be blooming under the surface. We started spending more weekends together as a family: wine nights, football Sundays, charity galas. Emily seemed to thrive in the space between me and my parents, balancing our worlds like a natural. I felt proud bringing her into the fold. She wasn't just becoming my wife, she was becoming one of us. How tragically poetic, in hindsight, that the very closeness I celebrated would become the chisel that carved through everything I held dear. At first, it was just a feeling. Vague, slippery, and easy to dismiss. Something about the way Emily laughed too loudly at my father's dry jokes, or how he seemed to linger just a little longer when hugging her goodbye. But love, or perhaps denial, is a master at smoothing over the rough edges of discomfort. I told myself it was nothing. In the months leading up to our wedding, Emily started working late more often. New clients, she'd say, shrugging off my questions with a tired smile and a kiss on the cheek. Her boutique marketing firm had apparently landed a string of big accounts, requiring extra hours and frequent trips to Milwaukee. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? My father, meanwhile, had also started mentioning Milwaukee in his conversations. Hot market these days, he'd say, sipping his coffee while scrolling through listings. Might expand some of my business out there. I never connected the dots, even when their travel dates aligned a little too perfectly. It seemed like a coincidence, a weird one, but still a coincidence. There were other moments too, subtle things. At family dinners they would sometimes share a private laugh about something no one else understood. When I asked, they'd wave it off. Inside joke, Emily would smile. Just something silly your dad said. My mother didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she never said anything. I started noticing changes in Emily, small ones, but undeniable. A new perfume she'd never worn before, a playlist she made that included old jazz tunes, my father's favorite genre. She once came home humming one of his favorite Louis Armstrong songs, and when I asked where she'd heard it, she blinked for a moment too long before replying, "Oh, I think it was playing at a cafe downtown." One evening, I came home earlier than planned and found her on the phone. She looked startled when she saw me, quickly ending the call with a vague, "I'll talk to you later." I asked who it was. "Just Megan, from work," she said. But she didn't meet my eyes. Still, I brushed it off. I wanted so badly to believe in her, in us. I chalked it up to wedding stress, to long work hours, to my own paranoia. Love makes excuses where logic might raise alarms. Even my father's behavior started to shift in subtle ways. He asked more questions about Emily than he used to. Not the casual, curious questions of a father. These were detailed, oddly specific. Does she still go to that spin class on Tuesdays? What's her favorite cocktail again? Old-fashioned, right? At the time, I thought he was just being interested. I didn't realize he was keeping track. The worst moment, the one that should have broken the illusion, came one Sunday afternoon. My father mentioned in passing that he'd be heading to Milwaukee that week. Later that night, Emily told me she had to go there too, same days, for a branding pitch. My stomach flipped, but I said nothing. I even smiled and said, "Funny coincidence." She nodded too quickly. Wait. They left separately, returned separately. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had no evidence, no proof, and yet a part of me, buried deep beneath layers of trust, began to whisper. I silenced it. I had to. We were weeks from the wedding. The venue was booked, the invitations sent, the tux tailored. How could I accuse them of something so vile, so unthinkable, without anything concrete? There was another moment I keep coming back to. A family dinner at my parents' house just 3 weeks before the wedding. Emily had brought dessert, my dad's favorite, lemon tart from a bakery across town. When I asked how she even knew about the place, she said, "Oh, I think you mentioned it once." But my father gave her a quick glance that lingered too long. They both smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you give across a crowded table. It was something else, something coded. That night, while we were doing dishes, I noticed her phone light up with a message from a number saved only as R. I didn't read the message. It disappeared too quickly, but the knot in my stomach returned. I asked, "Who's R?" She barely paused. "Rita, from the gym." Then, I changed the subject. These weren't just red flags anymore, they were warning sirens, but I shut them down, told myself I was projecting. Maybe I was scared of commitment and inventing reasons to panic. But deep down, I wasn't scared of marrying Emily. I was scared that she wasn't really mine anymore, and that I had already lost something I hadn't even realized was slipping away. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't ready to lose the illusion, not yet. The night before the wedding, my father and I stayed at the Grand Oak Hotel. We had separate rooms, but he came to mine after dinner to go over the final details. It was tradition, I told myself, spending the last night before everything changed with the man who had shaped me, guided me, and believed in me. My mother and Emily were staying elsewhere, following the old custom of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. The suite was luxurious, dark wood, velvet curtains, an almost reverent quiet that suited the gravity of the occasion. My father and I ordered room service and spent hours reviewing the timeline, seating arrangements, weather forecasts, and a backup plan if the string quartet canceled. It felt ordinary, comforting, even. We laughed. We drank bourbon. He told me how proud he was of the man I had become, and I believed him. Around 10:30 p.m. he excused himself to use the restroom, leaving his phone unlocked on the table. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But when the screen lit up with a new message from a contact labeled M, my eyes flicked toward it, unthinking. And then the words landed like a bomb. "Thank you for last night, the way you touched me. I'm still shaking. Can't wait to feel your hands again. Love you." Attached to the message was a photo. A hotel bed, 2 glasses of wine, and Emily, unmistakably naked beneath the sheets, her hand on my father's chest. He was smiling. She was smirking. There was no ambiguity, no chance I'd misread anything. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My hands were frozen on either side of the glowing screen. My heart was thudding so loudly I was afraid he'd hear it from the bathroom. A kind of cold clarity descended over me, numb, detached. Brutal. I picked up my own phone, snapped several photos of the screen, and uploaded them to a private cloud folder. My years in tech consulting had taught me about evidence, about contingency plans. I double-checked that the images were time-stamped and clear. Then I locked his phone, set it back exactly as it was, and stared at the wall for what felt like an eternity. When he came back, he looked relaxed, oblivious, and full of ease. He smiled and said, "Get some rest, son. Tomorrow's the big day." He even clapped my shoulder. My mouth was dry. I nodded, barely. He left for his own room minutes later, and I was alone. Along with a truth so vicious it hollowed me out. Alone in a hotel suite filled with flowers, suit bags, and betrayal. Along with the sound of my own heartbeat, trying to outrun the rage crawling up my throat. I sat there for hours, not moving, not thinking, not even crying. I was paralyzed between fury and disbelief, trapped in a surreal silence that screamed louder than any confrontation. I stared at the ceiling, but all I could see was that photo. Her skin, his smile, the audacity. The years of trust between us, obliterated in a single frame. My mind replayed every moment that suddenly made sense in reverse. The lemon tart, the shared glances, the overlapping trips. I thought of every time Emily had been late, every time my father had just dropped by, unannounced. I had dismissed it all. I had handed them the benefit of the doubt, again and again, blindfolded by my own loyalty. I wondered if my mother knew, if she had sensed it and, like me, chose to believe in the good rather than confront the ugly. Or maybe she too had been fooled by his charm, by his consistency, by decades of routine masquerading as honor. The betrayal didn't just come from their bodies tangled together. It came from the elaborate lie, the performance, the months of shared dinners and Sunday jokes while they hid this sickness behind my back. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, to call Emily and shout every curse I knew into her silence, to confront my father and ask him why he would destroy everything for her. But I didn't. I sat still, gripping the edge of the mattress like it could anchor me to reality. What do you do when the 2 people you trust most have already rehearsed your destruction? The silence of that night will haunt me forever, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Because that was the last night I would ever see the world the way I used to. Eventually, I moved to the window and looked out at the quiet streetlights flickering over the cobblestone driveway. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably laughing with her bridesmaids, drinking champagne, taking selfies with her white satin robe and bride-to-be sash. And my father, perhaps lying in his bed, already dreaming of walking me down the aisle with a secret in his pocket. The hypocrisy made my skin crawl. I sat back down, ran my fingers through my hair, and tried to remember the last time I had felt peace. Was it at our engagement dinner? At Lake Geneva when she said yes with tears in her eyes? Or had those moments been poisoned, too? Just pretty wrappers for a ticking bomb. The worst part was, I still loved them, both of them. That's what made it unbearable. I didn't just lose a fiancé and a father, I lost my sense of reality, my definition of loyalty. My belief was that love, once earned, was unbreakable. The betrayal didn't end in a photo, it started there, but the damage, it would ripple into everything. I didn't sleep that night, I didn't cry. I just waited for morning to come because I knew once the sun rose, nothing would ever be the same again. The wedding was still on the schedule, but something inside me had already been buried. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, as if it could explain how the world I'd built had crumbled in silence. Not even a blink, not even a warning. Just one message, one photo, one unbearable truth. My mind refused to rest. Every memory from the past 2 years surfaced like broken glass, shimmering, sharp, and impossible to avoid. I remembered the first time Emily said she loved me, the time my father hugged her a second too long, the champagne toast we made when we booked the venue. I recalled the gentle way my mother folded napkins at the rehearsal dinner, how proud she was, how happy. And all the while, I had been walking on a stage they built with lies, performing a role in a story where the ending had already been written, just not by me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure of the future I believed in, of the love I thought was real, of the family I thought I had. Sometime around 2:00 a.m., I finally called Carla Jensen. Carla had been my attorney for years, sharp, loyal, and as tough as they come. I hadn't planned on involving her, but I needed someone who could stand beside me in the aftermath. Someone with clarity when all I had was a storm. Like my mother, she picked up on the third ring, voice groggy but alert. "Daniel?" I told her everything. The message, the photo, the months of deception. I kept my voice steady, clinical, like I was narrating someone else's pain. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said, "First, I'm so sorry. No one deserves that. Second, I'm glad you called me." She confirmed what I needed to hear. I wasn't married. I didn't owe Emily anything legally. And if I chose to reveal the truth publicly at my own wedding, I was within every right to do so. "You're not distributing private material," she said. "You're exposing your own experience on your property, in your context. That matters." She offered to be there, discreet, calm, a legal presence in case things spiraled. We made a plan. And for the first time in hours, I felt something other than numbness, not peace, not hope, just resolve. I turned on my laptop, opened a clean browser window, and began uploading the images, the screenshots, the timestamps. I designed a minimal web page. White background, black serif font, soft music. It looked like a wedding gallery. It was anything but. Then I generated a QR code, clean, centered, innocent. I used the hotel's business center to print 200 cards, thick cardstock, elegant font, a message, a special gift from the bride and groom, scanned for memories. Each card held the code, each code held the truth. By the time dawn pushed its gray light through the curtains, I had repacked my emotions into something that looked like composure. I showered, shaved, put on the tuxedo Emily had insisted I tailor in Italy. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a broken man. I saw someone they hadn't destroyed. Because while they plotted behind my back, I had been sharpening my integrity like a blade. And now, I was ready to walk into the ceremony they planned and turn it into a reckoning. But even as the plan took shape, the grief clawed its way back in. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and thought about what the morning was supposed to be. I was supposed to wake up nervous but excited. I was supposed to open a card from Emily, read her handwriting, telling me how much she couldn't wait to become my wife. I was supposed to take pictures with my best man, call my mom, and tie my cufflinks while laughing at childhood memories. Instead, I was staring into a future I hadn't asked for. One where trust was a corpse and love was a joke. Every few minutes, waves of pain rolled through me. Not loud, not violent, just steady. A dull ache behind the eyes, a tightness in the chest, like my body had absorbed a blow it didn't know how to release. I thought about canceling, just walking away from it all. I called my mom, telling her I was sick, letting the guests show at an empty altar. But that felt cowardly, and I wasn't the coward in this story. So I dressed, slowly, methodically, every button as a small declaration that I would not let them own the ending. I placed the QR code cards into a gift bag. I messaged Janet, my wedding coordinator, with clear instructions. Pass the cards discreetly to guests once the ceremony started. She didn't ask questions. She'd seen enough weddings to know when a groom's voice carried steel. As I left my room, I felt strangely calm, not happy, not healed, but no longer drowning. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth and reclaiming the narrative of my life from the people who had tried to rewrite it behind my back. And if pain was the price of clarity, I was ready to pay in full. The morning of my wedding arrived without ceremony. No bird song, no sunrise epiphany, just the cold light of truth filtering through thick hotel curtains. I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the final button on my vest. The tuxedo fit perfectly, sleek, midnight black with a subtle paisley lining. Emily had chosen it herself, months ago, insisting that it brought out my shoulders and made me look presidential. The irony wasn't lost on me. My fingers moved with mechanical precision, cufflinks, tie, pocket square. I had dressed for countless high-stakes business meetings, but never for a moment like this. This wasn't just an event, it was a reckoning. The cards were neatly packed in a linen pouch inside my coat pocket. 200 small squares of cardstock. A QR code printed in soft gray ink. The message beneath it simple: a special gift from the bride and groom. Janet, my wedding coordinator, met me outside the chapel entrance. She looked radiant and unsuspecting, clipboard in hand, headset in place. "Timeline is running like clockwork," she chirped. "We're starting in 15. I handed her the pouch. "Could you pass these out just after the opening prayer? Quietly. Just a little something for the guests." She peeked inside and smiled. "You're always full of surprises." I gave her a nod, and she moved along, oblivious to the truth she carried in her hands. Inside St. Andrew's Chapel, everything was picture perfect. White roses lined the pews. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Candles flickered beneath stained glass. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes already, believing this was the happiest day of her son's life. My father arrived minutes later. He wore a smile as polished as his shoes, shaking hands with guests, laughing too loudly. I saw him glance at me from across the room and offer a thumbs up. My stomach turned. Emily appeared like clockwork. White gown, long veil, her sister adjusting the train. She smiled at me with all the innocence of a woman who hadn't just shattered everything I believed in. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Ready?" "Ready." That word echoed through me like a war drum. I took my place at the altar. My best man stood beside me, unaware. My heart pounded, but not from nerves, from focus. As Father Mackenzie began the ceremony, Janet moved through the pews, slipping cards to guests in small groups. Most smiled and tucked them away, but a few, curious, eager, began scanning. I saw the first reaction in the third row, Uncle Ray's brows furrowing, then his mouth falling open. Across the aisle, my college roommate nudged his wife, both staring down at their phones. A ripple passed through the crowd, silent at first, then audible. Gasps, murmurs, phones passed from hand to hand. Still the priest spoke on. Emily, oblivious, kept her eyes on me, smiling sweetly. Then her aunt tapped her shoulder and showed her the screen. Emily turned, blinked once, and the color drained from her face. My father shifted in his seat. His phone buzzed. He looked down, stared, and I watched the mask crack, first in his eyes, then in his jaw. The moment had arrived. I stepped forward, and with a steady voice I spoke the truth. Because healing doesn't begin when the pain ends. It begins when you finally stop pretending you're okay. The silence in the church was no longer reverent, it was electric. You could feel it crackling in the air, pulsing from pew to pew. The sound of phones unlocking, camera shutters snapping, and hushed whispers growing louder. It wasn't chaos yet, but it was coming. And I stood there, at the epicenter, completely still. This was what I had prepared for. Not revenge, not really. What I wanted was clarity. A mirror held up to the lie so no one could ever say they didn't see it. So no one could pretend, like I had, that everything was fine. I scanned the faces, my mother's trembling hands clutching the card she'd just scanned. My boss looked around in stunned disbelief. Emily's sister, pale as chalk, frozen with her bouquet mid-air. Every eye in that church was shifting from their screens to me, then back to her. And Emily, she was unraveling in real time. She reached out to touch my arm. I didn't move. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to plead. I didn't let her speak. Because this wasn't her story to control anymore. I nodded slightly to Father Mackenzie, who had paused mid-sentence. Then I stepped forward, reached for the microphone, and took a breath. This wasn't going to be dramatic. It wasn't going to be cruel. It was going to be the truth. But that truth, spoken out loud, would be louder than any scream. And after today, no one, especially them, would ever doubt who I was, or what I was willing to stand for. Father Mackenzie's voice echoed across the pews, calm and deliberate. If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. Then, I stepped forward. I reached for the microphone, not with a trembling hand, but with the steady calm of someone who had already walked through fire and come out the other side. "I have something to say." Gasps. All eyes turned toward me. Emily's smile vanished. She blinked, confused, then terrified, her gaze scanning the crowd. Dozens of guests now staring at their phones, some whispering, others frozen. "I loved you, Emily," I said, turning to her. "With everything I had, I planned to spend the rest of my life with you. I built a future around you." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "And you," I said, turning to Stephen, my father. "You were my hero. You taught me about honor, loyalty, and trust. At least I thought you did." Stephen stood up, face pale, lips parted. "Son?" "No," I cut him off. "Not today." I turned back to the congregation. "For those of you wondering what's going on," I said, "check your phones. You've already received the answer. The QR code cards passed out before the ceremony contained the truth. Undeniable, time-stamped proof of betrayal." Murmurs turned into sharp intakes of breath. I watched expressions shift, from confusion to horror, disbelief to sympathy. "My fiancée and my father have been sleeping together for months. I found out last night, through a message she sent him, thanking him for exploring every inch of her. I let that line hang in the air like smoke. Attached was a photo, intimate, dated, unmistakable." Emily dropped her bouquet. It hit the marble with a soft thud. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor, veil slipping sideways. Her sister ran to her, but Emily pushed her away, face buried in her hands. Stephen stepped into the aisle, pleading, "Daniel, please, it was a mistake. I didn't mean—" "Don't insult this room," I snapped. "You didn't trip and fall into my fiancé's bed. You planned it. You lied. You sat through family dinners, toasted to our engagement, laughed at inside jokes while I sat there like a fool." My voice didn't shake. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the damage. I turned to my mother, whose face was blank with devastation. "You didn't deserve this either," I said softly. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserved the truth. We all did." Guests began to stand. Some were crying. Some just stared, stunned. My best man took a step forward, unsure whether to stop me or follow me out. I gave him a small nod. "Stay." I turned back to the altar one last time. Emily was sobbing now, gasping for air, smeared mascara trailing down her cheeks. Stephen looked like a statue, carved from shame. "This wedding is over," I said clearly, "and so are these relationships." Then I turned, walked down the aisle, not with shame, but with purpose. The chapel doors opened before me like a curtain rising on the next act of my life. Outside, the October air felt different, crisp, alive, unscripted. Behind me, I heard voices rising, Emily calling out, Stephen trying to explain, guests buzzing with disbelief. But I didn't turn around, because the chapter had closed, and I had written the ending myself. The real vows I made that day were not to someone else, but to myself. Never again would I hand my trust to those who hadn't earned it. As I walked past the pews, guests leaned away to let me pass. Some placed hands on my shoulder, others simply nodded, eyes wide with a mix of sorrow and admiration. They had come for a wedding. They got something raw, unforgettable. A masterclass in dignity under fire. At the back of the church, I paused for one final glance. Not for closure, but to etch the moment into memory. Emily was still on the floor, her sister now crouched beside her. My father had sunk into a pew, head in hands, shoulders slumped. My mother, stoic as ever, had risen from her seat. Her tears had dried. What remained was quiet strength. She caught my eye and nodded once. We would be okay. Outside, the late morning sun painted the pavement gold. My best man eventually joined me, stunned and speechless. Dude, what the hell just happened? I let out a breath that felt like months of poison. Justice, I said simply. The story, of course, didn't end there. Within hours, screenshots of the Quid Codes site went viral. A cousin posted it on Instagram. A college friend tweeted it. By sunset, the headlines had begun. Groom exposes fiancé and father at altar with scandalous QR code reveal. But I didn't care about the noise. Because beneath all the sensationalism was a message I hoped someone else might hear. Someone doubting their worth after betrayal. Someone swallowing their pain in silence. You are not alone. You can lose everything and still walk forward. Dignified, clear-eyed, free. That day, I didn't get married, but I found something more valuable, my voice, and I'll never give it up again. The days following what the media dubbed the hell wedding unraveled faster than I could have predicted, just not for me. Emily was the first to fall. Her company, a boutique marketing agency in Manhattan that prided itself on family values and strong public image, wasted no time. By Monday morning, her name had been scrubbed from the company website. By Wednesday, she was escorted out of the building with her personal belongings in a cardboard box. Clients had complained. Partners withdrew from campaigns. Internally, HR cited a violation of moral and ethical conduct clauses. But everyone knew what it really was: damage control. Emily had become radioactive. She retreated from Manhattan to her parents' house in Vermont, a sprawling old farmhouse she once called too rustic for her taste. Now it was the only place that would have her. The glamorous, city-loving Emily was suddenly grounded, surrounded by silence, cows, and the crushing weight of disgrace. Friends stopped answering her texts, her social media went dark, and the influencer's dreams she once nursed vanished like mist. She didn't just lose a fiancé, she lost her world. Stephen's collapse was less immediate, but no less spectacular. In Chicago, his real estate brokerage had thrived on reputation. Decades of trust, handshakes, loyalty. But reputation is a brittle thing, and betrayal, especially of your own son, doesn't sit well in polite society. Several longtime clients pulled out within a week. One of his biggest investors, a man who had been his business partner for 15 years, sent a single email: "We're done." Contracts were canceled, listings disappeared. His face, once a fixture on top brokers of Chicago ads, became a cautionary tale. Then came the divorce. My mother, Mary, didn't yell. She didn't cry publicly. She simply walked into a law office and filed the papers. 35 years of marriage undone in minutes. But the real cut was her silence. Stephen tried to call. She didn't answer. He sent flowers. She sent them back. He came to the house one evening, begging on the porch, only to be greeted by the sound of the deadbolt sliding shut. What he had destroyed wasn't just his marriage or his career. It was the quiet dignity of a woman who had given him her youth, her loyalty, her whole life, and she was done. Their downfall wasn't theatrical. There were no screaming matches or public breakdowns, just the slow public erosion of everything they had once built, as people watched and whispered and walked away. What surprised me most was how quickly their allies became strangers. Colleagues who once praised Stephen as the last honest broker now avoided his calls. The golf club suspended his membership, citing reputational concerns. Even the neighbors on his suburban block, people who once waved every morning, suddenly pulled into garages without a glance. For Emily, the exile was quieter but equally brutal. I heard through mutual contacts that she spent her days indoors, curtains drawn. Her parents tried to shield her, but even in their small Vermont town, word traveled fast. At the local grocery store, cashiers whispered. Old classmates walked past her like she was invisible. One friend tried to defend her online, claiming the story had been one-sided. Within hours, screenshots from the QR page surfaced again, demolishing the argument. The truth was too clear, too well documented, too viral to be rewritten. They tried to move on, of course. Stephen attempted to rebrand under a new brokerage, but the industry wasn't buying. Emily tried freelancing, but every client who Googled her name declined the proposal. It wasn't just a fall from grace. It was exile from a world they once ruled. And no matter how far they ran, the echo of that day followed them, loud, merciless, and unforgettable. 3 months later, I boarded a one-way flight to Austin, Texas. The city welcomed me, with warm sun, open skies, and the promise of anonymity. No one here cared about the wedding that broke the internet. No one recognized my name. I was just another transplant, building something new. I took a job as director of artificial intelligence at a growing tech firm. The position was demanding, but it felt like purpose, not distraction. I poured myself into algorithms and product launches, systems that made sense, where trust could be quantified, and failure didn't stab you in the chest. But I didn't bury what happened. I carried it. Not as baggage, but as a blueprint. I kept seeing Carla Jensen, my attorney. We had coffee once a week, not to discuss cases, but life. She became a strange kind of therapist, sharp, unflinching, honest. One morning I asked her if I'd ever stop being angry. "You already have," she said. "You just haven't noticed. What you're holding now isn't anger, it's clarity." She was right. That clarity allowed me to do something unexpected. I met with Stephen one last time before leaving Chicago. He looked 10 years older, thinner. His voice had lost the booming charm it once held. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I needed to tell you how sorry I am." I looked him in the eyes, and for the first time, saw the man, not the myth I had worshipped. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "but that doesn't mean I'll ever forget." He nodded. "That's fair." And it was. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a gift to the other person. It was a release for myself, a closing of a chapter so I could start the next without dragging every page behind me. In Austin, I began dating again, slowly, carefully. I no longer rushed to trust. I asked better questions. I watched for silences that meant more than words. And I made honesty my first language. The betrayal that nearly broke me had become my crucible. Because of it, I learned. That truth isn't fragile. It's fire. And when wielded correctly, it purifies. That love without integrity is theater. That family is defined by character, not blood. And that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you, the beginning of everything worth becoming. Sometimes, at night, I'd sit on the balcony of my apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand, and think about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The silence no longer felt empty, it felt earned. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since college. It helped me make sense of the jagged pieces, helped me trace the moment my life split and the path I chose instead of collapse. I spoke at a local tech conference in Austin a few months after arriving. Someone asked me how I handled high-pressure decisions. I smiled. "You'd be amazed at what you can do when your entire life implodes in one afternoon." They laughed. I didn't need to explain further. The truth was, the worst day of my life had sharpened me. I no longer feared chaos. I understood it. I could walk through fire and still keep my vision intact. Eventually, I started mentoring younger developers, not just in tech, but in resilience. I told them, bad code is easy to fix. Bad trust, that takes guts. But you survive, and if you stay true to yourself, you come out stronger. And I did. Stronger, smarter, and finally free of illusions. Not every fairy tale ends in a kiss, some end in fire, but fire, if you let it, forges steel.